Chapter 37 His image as a woman. How many times did one have to be scolded in their life?
So Anzining was lectured on the phone by the elder An. Anzining didn't think anyone would be able to hear the contents of the phone, so she didn't turn around to hide. Unable to help himself, Ye Shuang was forced to listen to the entire conference. After hanging up the phone, Ye Shuang came to a conclusion. Such an event was common in the An family. The elder on the phone was naturally angry, but the words of disapproval naturally flowed as if they had been rehearsed. Anzining obediently nodded with the ease of someone who had been through this more than once. After scolding Anzining, the elder hung up the phone. They happened to stop in front of a restaurant. This store serves a good selection of breakfasts and brunches. They are famous for their Hong Kong-style dim sum. What do you think? Shall we eat here? Ye Shuang almost knelt on the floor, impressed by Anzining's nonchalance after dealing with the endless scolding on the phone. It was as if she had reached such a state of serenity that as soon as the words entered her left ear, they would come out on the right. How many times did one have to be scolded in one's life to achieve such Zen mastery? Regardless of everything, one thing was certain. This Anzining had great taste in food. Ye Shuang came from an ordinary family. In 20 years of life, she had never set foot in such an expensive place, so she couldn't really tell whether the supposed Hong Kong-style dim sum was authentic or not. However, with her better sense of taste, she could tell that the taste of the place matched the price of the menu. The shrimp dumpling was soft and supple. The half-transparent skin was as white as snow and as thin as paper. The shrimp filling was shiny inside as if it could burst at any moment. The su mei skin was as thin as a waving leaf, the filling overflowing with juice. The char siu bun was baked to perfection, the outer layer crisp to the touch, and the meat was tender and bounced divinely on the tongue. Since the DNA inheritance, Ye Shuang's appetite had decreased tremendously. It wasn't that she had suddenly become picky with food, but once her taste buds were optimized, all the weaknesses that had not been noticed before surfaced. For example, the Ye family liked to go to a barbecue stand near their home. The place served spicy lamb skewers at a very low price, making it a favorite among the locals. However, after the optimization, when Ye Shuang visited the place again, she found that the meat was too soft, as if it had been chemically treated. The spicy sauce had a musty smell and the food served was unhygienic. Therefore, after informing the rest of the Ye family of the news, the family of four stopped frequenting the place. In today's society, where almost all food contains some kind of chemical, Ye Shuang had almost nothing to eat. Even if the food at home could be simple, it was at least fresh. It was so hard to find an outside restaurant that could match his taste. Before her plan was ruined by Anzining, Ye Shuang had planned to buy a bowl of plain porridge and leave it at that. Of course, porridge without artificial thickeners. Looks like what they say is true, you shouldn't skimp on food. The place where Fang Mo treated her last time was good, and the store that Anzining introduced this time was also very good. In other words, for the sake of her stomach, she should find a way to get money or focus on improving her cooking skills. Either way, based on her body's current state of optimization, neither should be too difficult. Ye Shuang was so caught up in her own thoughts that she didn't realize that the entire table had stared at her, well, more specifically at her and the mountain of empty plates in front of her. Even though the dim sum was served in small portions, this kind of appetite was also quite abnormal. Even Anzining was shocked. However, she quickly laughed and said, "Looks like all martial experts need a lot of food to replenish their energy." Ye Shuang coughed dryly. She thought, sister An really likes to joke around. I know a little about martial arts, but that hardly makes me an expert. Ye Shuang smiled awkwardly, doing her best to save her image as a woman. She wouldn't want to be known as a wuxia lady from this point on. Of course, one of the principles practiced by martial experts is humility. Don't worry, I understand, Anzining said with a sneer. It wasn't Ye Shuang's plan to be a close friend to Anzining. It wasn't that Anzining was a horrible person or that Ye Shuang was so rude to drop her after getting some advantages, but because their positions in life were simply too different. It was a coincidence that Ye Shuang helped Anzining, but the former couldn't leverage the latter for life. Moreover, Anzining's thoughtless and irascible personality had to be taken into account. For example, she was easily tricked by a sentence from her little brother. It might not cause Anzining much harm, but what if one day that person who had a way to get into Anzining's ear became hostile to Ye Shuang? The biggest difference between Fang Mo and Anzining was that the former had a more mature faculty of thought and was more tolerant of others. Even if they broke up in the future, Fang Mo would not be passionate about emotions or other rumors to turn against her. That's why Ye Shuang felt safe being her friend. After the luxurious brunch, Ye Shuang received a call from Fang Mo. With her help, the transfer had gone smoothly. The apartment was now officially under Ye Shuang's name. After paying the bills, and Zining's phone rang. Ye Shuang heard a male voice through the phone say, "Sis, Grandpa just." Answering the phone, and Zining waved goodbye to Ye Shuang. Ye Shuang did the same and left without comment. The world of the rich was not a world in which she could simply mingle.
Chapter 38 My Boyfriend's Friend. What is a home-cooked meal?
When Ye Shuang got home, it was almost noon. Ye Shuang thought it was the perfect opportunity to improve her cooking skills, so she took a detour to the shopping mall to buy some cooking ingredients. The country's fishing and farming industry had actually improved greatly in recent years. As long as you didn't buy the discounted products, you could often find the freshest ingredients at the mall. Of course, this was only possible in the national supermarket chains. For local convenience stores, an incomplete stock or lack of freshness was inevitable. Some people thought that cooking required talent, but after the legacy of memory, Ye Shuang had become accustomed to approaching each skill with a logical and rational method. From his point of view, cooking was nothing more than an amalgam of various skills, such as memory, concentration, hand-eye coordination, chemistry and observation. Those who have taken cooking classes know that the very first step in preparing a dish is to memorize the recipe. None of the steps can be skipped. For example, skipping the bleeding step before preparing a chicken stew will ruin the taste. When making buns, whether to use cold or hot water to mix the dough before letting it rise will decide the softness of the crust. What is the ideal temperature of the oil for sautéing and drying? Should wet ingredients be mixed with dry ingredients or vice versa when making a cake? No detail should be overlooked, or the finished product may be completely inedible. Next comes knife skills. Dicing and slicing requires practice, so does holding and flipping the wok. If someone wanted to become a chef without a few years of training, they could be lucky if the head chef didn't reward them with a slap. How hot should the fire be? How long should the food cook? What is the perfect ratio of condiments? If you get out of the traditional recipes, you have to learn the different chemical reactions between all types of ingredients. Some ingredients, such as pears and crabs, cannot go together because they cause an upset stomach. Of course, normal citizens don't pay that much attention to everyday cooking, and most families are content with home-cooked meals only. But what is a home-cooked meal? After the ingredients are roughly prepared, they are all thrown into the pan, with sugar or salt added, and can be served. This is a home-cooked meal. Families that are more particular may add a few garnishes like spring onions, but that's about it. The hostess of each family memorized several recipes for special occasions like Chinese New Year, when family and friends came to visit. If she could serve appetizing dishes during this time of year, she could already be considered a good cook. Even the chefs of the five-star hotels had their specialties. Due to the limitations of human memory, it was impossible to expect them to memorize every little detail of their inherited recipes. However, Ye Shuang did not have this limitation. Moreover, her hand-eye coordination was such that she was able to imitate any action she saw with a single glance. Therefore, after several glances at the cooking video that was playing on her tablet, the cooking counter flashed with the flashes and shadows of the knife. Mother Ye watched as a whole potato was filleted into slices as thin as a butterfly's wings in minutes. Indeed, even with her inhuman talent, Ye Shuang was only making a simple dish. It wasn't because she didn't feel confident enough to challenge more difficult recipes, but the ingredients were limited at home. Besides, what home kitchen would have those unique ingredients, herbs and spices needed to make complicated dishes? It was already great that the Ye family had chili, anise, onion, ginger and garlic. The newlyweds could prepare something extra like salad dressing or olive oil to spice up married life, but after years of marriage, who had the energy to do it? The wife was already tired of taking care of the children all day and managing the family budget. Mother Ye, the experienced housewife for many years, felt strangely defeated. She turned around to surreptitiously greet her husband and son, who were waiting in the living room. Ignoring the anxious expression on their faces, Mother Ye went to her room to nurse her broken heart. Even with Mother Ye's approval, Father Ye and little brother Ye still felt incredibly nervous, but they didn't dare to put their heads into the kitchen, for fear of seeing things they didn't want to see. Therefore, they waited patiently until a delicious smell came out of the kitchen. Just as little brother Ye wanted to sneak into the kitchen to take a sneak peek, the doorbell rang. When Ye Shuang came out to serve the dishes, she saw Fang Mo, who was standing in front of the door. Brother Fang, Ye Shuang greeted with a big smile. Your timing is perfect, come join us for lunch. Of course, Fang Mo didn't come uninvited. After all, he was helping Ye Shuang manage the housing affairs. Ye Shuang couldn't invite him to a restaurant meal or give him a proper gift, but she could at least give him a home-cooked meal. Without the guest, Ye Shuang wouldn't have needed to cook so quickly. She would have taken more time to prepare by reading more recipes. Naturally, Ye Shuang was confident in her cooking skills, otherwise she wouldn't have arranged it this way. Of course, if the dishes she prepared could not be served, she would drag the person to the nearest restaurant and spend a good amount of money. On the one hand, it would be good for her palate, and on the other hand, it was still worth it. The price of a meal for a house, of course, it was worth it. Father Yi was initially cautious about this man who said he was invited, but after listening to Ye Shuang's explanation, everything was fine. Ye Shuang hadn't had time to inform her family that Fang Mo had helped her secure a house, but that didn't stop the Yi family from welcoming him. In fact, Mother Yi pulled Ye Shuang into the kitchen with her bright eyes. As she ordered the two men of the house to serve and distract the guest, she tried to gather information from Ye Shuang. What is this man's family background? What about his personality? Have you decided that it will be him? How long have you known him already? Was this relationship cemented during the night you shared with him at the hotel? Quote. Ye Shuang suddenly felt like she was talking to the spirit of Grandma Luo, the spymaster. Mother Yi looked at the blank expression on Ye Shuang's face, and she tutted. Why are you fooling around with your own mother? Didn't you say that if you want to stabilize your sex, you have to have, that thing? So, finding a boyfriend to marry should be your main mission. Or is this man your boyfriend? Although I think it's still too early for you to get married, from what I can see, this man isn't bad, he looks pretty stable. Ye Shuang suddenly felt like he was hit on the head with a mallet. Looking at the closest and best candidate who was sitting in the living room, Ye Shuang suddenly felt her heart break. She turned around with tears in her eyes and lamented to Mother Yi, that one is a no-nonsense, he is my boyfriend's good friend. What? You have another boyfriend? Mother Yi gasped. However, she quickly accepted it. After all, birds of a feather flock together. If he was a friend of this Fang Mo, then he couldn't be that bad either. Before this thought could settle in her mind, her daughter continued her explanation. I mean, he's a friend I made when I was in my male form. Mother Yi was left speechless.
Chapter 39 Shrimp and Bok Choy. What is this talk of apartments, houses and assets?
While Ye Shuang and Mother Yi were lamenting over the loss of such a wonderful potential candidate, the potential candidate himself was in awe of the show that was going on in the lounge. Even though he hadn't tasted the food yet, just by the smell and appearance, he was already very impressed. To be able to prepare such a high level of homemade meal, Fang Mo thought it was logical that his friend had found a romantic partner in Ye Shuang. The stir-fried bok choy practically glowed with an emerald glow. The sweet and sour braised ribs glowed appetizingly. The smell of the tofu and shrimp soup was heavenly, carrying with it the freshness of the sea. The dishes that filled the table were home-cooked dishes, but the knife skills, decoration and coloring were worthy of a professional chef. The only flaw was the fried potato strips. The strips were too small, but they didn't break into flakes during the cooking process. Was this in itself a masterful technique, or was it some kind of new dish he had never encountered before? Fang Mo looked away, trying to stop himself from salivating. He began to anticipate lunch. Soon after, Mother Yi and Ye Shuang came out of the kitchen together. As a guest, Fang Mo was naturally treated with kindness and respect by the hosts. Father Yi and little brother Yi had been waiting for the mealtime for a long time already, but they still behaved with civility because of Fang Mo. As the man of the house, Father Yi was the first to move his chopsticks. He grabbed a stem of bok choy, and the moment he put it in his mouth, he was stunned. Before forgetting his manners, Father Yi invited Fang Mo to eat before he started to increase his eating speed. Before Fang Mo had even taken a bite, about a quarter of the food was already gone. At this point, Ye Shuang felt worried. The purpose of the lunch was to thank Fang Mo for her help, but the way things were going, the guest might leave her house on an empty stomach. Thus, desperate times called for desperate measures. With a speed that rivaled lightning itself, Ye Shuang filled Fang Mo's plate with food. More than that, she even considered the arrangement and mating of the food. In other words, she played Lego with the food on his plate. When Fang Mo came to, the tower of ribs in front of him had already almost reached his chin. Thank you, but that's enough, I won't be able to finish it. Fang Mo stopped Ye Shuang by commenting with a smile, I must say, I didn't know you were such a good cook, even though I was your boss for so long. Did you start learning when you were a child? Our company doesn't have a cooking party, so how would you know that I am a good cook? Ye Shuang shamelessly accepted the compliment. You're not wrong. Fang Mo nodded before taking out a document from his bag and passing it to Ye Shuang. He picked up his chopsticks and said, "This is the certificate for the apartment. As of today, the house is your asset, but I recommend renovating it before you move in. We can talk about it after lunch." Chewing on the piece of rib, Fang Mo instantly understood why the Yi family had acted like they hadn't eaten in years. As he said, everything else could wait until after lunch. While they were enjoying the meal, Ye Shuang was happy, because one of his problems had been solved. After clearing the plates, with a glass of water in his hand, recalling the exquisite taste of the food, Father Yi suddenly remembered the topic they were talking about before lunch. Father Yi turned around to ask Ye Shuang, Shuang, what's this talk about apartments, houses and properties? Fang Mo frowned and looked at Ye Shuang questioningly. Ye Shuang ignored him and explained to Father Yi, well, we discussed the possibility of me moving out earlier, remember? So, after explaining the situation with Fang Mo from time to fill in the details, Ye Shuang gulped down a large glass of water to quench his parched throat before concluding, and that's it. I'll be moving out soon. The Yi parents looked at each other in amazement. Yes, they had discussed the need for their daughter to move, given the state she was in. After all, living in their house with alternating genders would draw too much attention. Starting over in a different environment could save a lot of trouble. There would still be neighbors, but as long as she kept a good distance, everything would be fine. However, based on their understanding of the current real estate market, it would take several months, as they needed to raise enough money for the down payment on the new house. Who would have thought that their daughter would manage to find a furnished apartment so quickly? Fang Mo noticed the awkward situation in the room and consoled with a smile, Mr. and Mrs. Yi, don't worry. Despite Ms. Chen's impetuous personality, she is a woman of her word. This purchase is totally legal, and Miss Yi has just saved Mr. and Mrs. Chen's life. They won't mind giving her such a gift, after all, a small apartment like this won't hurt their finances. Mother Yi replied, we're not worried, we just feel like it sounds a little too much like a fantasy story. In fact, when he saw what happened on the stage, he had also thought he was watching a fantasy movie.